Order à l'ordre. The Public Order Emergency Commission is now in session. La commission sur l'état d'urgence est maintenant ouverte.
Good morning. Bonjour. Okay, so we have a new witness, I expect, this morning. Who's on for the commission?
Morning, Mr. Commissioner. Jean-Simon Schoenholz, Commission Counsel. Our witness this morning will be Mr. Jim Willett.
Morning, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor Willett, will you swear on a religious document or do you wish to affirm?
I swear on the Bible.
For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
My full name is Jimmy Willett, Jimmy Willett.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do so swear.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor Willett.
Good morning.
So I understand that you're the mayor of Coutts, Alberta,
That's correct.
and you've been a resident of Coutts since 2013
That's correct.
and a councillor for the past 5 years
Yes,
and mayor for 4 years now.
yes,
Okay. And you had an interview with me and my colleagues on September 6th of this year. Remember that?
yes, I do.
And you remember seeing a summary of your interview?
I do.
So if we could just pull up WTS 6012. So this is going to be a summary of that interview. You had an opportunity to review this summary, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. And I understand that you have a clarification to your summary this morning.
I do. When we talk about the police presence in the village, I mentioned the fact that there were around 6 police cars I saw the first day. And then the next mention I made of police was when the group moved in on the 1st or 2nd of February. Actually, there was a police presence growing all the time in the village. It didn't go from 6 to 50 in one day, 3 days into the protests.
Yes. So I'll bring you to that passage just so we can confirm. So on the second page, and it's the 4th paragraph down. So this is where you say the paragraph starting on January 29th. Second to last sentence, he observed approximately 6 RCMP vehicles at the border that day. Then you say on February 1st, an additional 42 RCMP vehicles arrived at the border. And what you're saying is that between those dates, there was a gradual buildup.
There was a buildup, yes.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to put that summary into evidence. Now I understand, Mr. Mayor, that you live about 4 blocks from the border and 3 blocks from where the protest was occurring. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And while these events were happening, would it be fair to say that you attended the location or went to look what was going on a fairly regular basis?
That's correct, yes.
And what's the population of the village of Coutts?
Last census had us at 224.
And I understand that the village's amenities include a convenience store, a restaurant, a bank, but that a number of the other services that residents would use would be found in Milk River. Is that correct?
That's correct. All of the major things that you take for granted in a larger community, we have to go to Milk River for: doctor, pharmacy, dentist, hardware store, any of that kind of thing, grocery store.
And Milk River is about 18 kilometers away.
18K.
Sounds good. So if we could just pull up COM 924. This is a map of Coutts and the surrounding area. We looked at a similar map yesterday with one of the other witnesses, and so I won't go into detail on this, but if we can just go to page 5. And if we could, yeah, that works. So my understanding is that the blockade formed around the point identified as checkpoint 4.
That's correct.
That's correct. And Smuggler's Saloon, which we'll talk about a little bit today, that is a local establishment, and that's identified here on the map as well.
Yes.
And that's where a number of protesters regularly met.
Yes, that became a gathering spot. Yeah.
And so my understanding is that the blockade that occurred was on Highway 4. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that highway connects Coutts and Milk River?
That's our connection. Yeah.
And I know things may have fluctuated during this period, but when the blockade was blocking both lanes of traffic, was it preventing Coutts residents from traveling to Milk River?
Yes, it was.
And would it have also been preventing traffic flow from the border, coming out from the border?
Well, yes, yes,
And any traffic south to the border?
yes.
Okay. Now, I also understand that there was some kind of route, and I'm hoping you can explain this to us, some kind of alternative route available through what I think you referred to as Patty Joe's field or something like that.
It's actually her yard. I wasn't there when all of this part of the world was developed, but when the highway was turned into a 4-lane major thoroughfare, things changed. An access road runs along to the south of that highway and ends at a farm there. Local family rented the farm. Then they continued their road around their house, and it connected to the street at, I forget what that is, 4th Street, I think, in Coutts. And with permission, ordinarily, you'd let Patty Joe know that you wanted to take a load or whatever that way to miss the scales. Can I say that? That you were going to be going through her yard, and you'd drive through their yard, and that was an alternate route, as it were. It suddenly began carrying a whole lot of traffic, and they got to the point where they couldn't use their home, really.
And so how is that route being used during January and February of this year when there was a full blockade on the highway? What did it allow traffic to do?
Well, it allowed you to miss the blockade, and you could go up to close to the rail crossing. There's a county road there, and it goes out onto the highway just at the rail crossing around the curve from what we're looking at here. And so it allowed people to drive through there and miss the blockade and go on up to Milk River.
And so would it allow traffic coming from the border to circumvent the blockade and go all the way up to Milk River?
It would have, except it's not really a truck route. And if somebody came in driving, there's no reason that they couldn't have cut through Coots and then through Patty Joe's place. But you'd have to know, if you're local, you know. And yeah, that you could get around. Yeah.
And I assume the same is true for any Coots residents trying to get to Milk River. They could have also used that route had they known.
Yeah, everybody knew it was there and you could go that way.
And are you aware of whether RCMP was redirecting any traffic through that route?
Yes, they did. We talked, I talked with Curtis, Corporal Curtis Peters, who was my contact, and let him know about the road. He wanted to, they made some communication, and what we wound up doing, what they wound up doing was making a square. The ground was frozen, and so they were able to run straight ahead from the street, make a right at the end of Patty Joe's property and go down that way, so you didn't have to go through her yard. And so it became an unofficial exit point. In fact, they took trucks through there later.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand that police services for the village are provided by the provincial division of the RCMP.
That's correct.
And the nearest detachment is in Milk River, correct?
Yes.
And how many officers are posted there?
4 to 5.
I'd like to go to COU 50249. I understand that on January 4th, a protest organizer attended the village office to advise of the upcoming protest. Do you remember that?
Yes, you'll see this is signed Kelly. She's the assistant in the office to my CAO, and she received a phone call.
And during that phone call, how did the protester describe the anticipated protest?
They were just giving us a heads up that they were going to be coming and doing a slow roll around the entrance to the country. And as you can see, it says that they won't be blocking any residents from using the entrance and exit.
If we can go to COU 401515. So I understand from your witness statement that on social media a little bit later, around the 27th, I think you said, you saw a post suggesting there would be an attempt to block the border.
Yes.
Correct? Is this the post that you saw?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And do you know where you saw this posting?
It was on a bulletin board out of Lethbridge. My wife spotted a link on the Lethbridge and area, how are the roads? It's a Facebook post that obviously gives traffic reports, and there was a link there, and we followed that link to this particular document.
And so were you concerned at that time about the risk of a blockade occurring?
Very much so.
And why were you concerned? In particular for your residents, can you tell us about why you were concerned?
We had been slammed by snowbirds, which if you don't live there, that may make no sense at all. But the 18th of November, the U.S. changed the border crossings to allow fully vaccinated people to enter the states. And all of the people who ordinarily go south for the winter down to Arizona in their RVs and so on decided they had to be there at midnight in order to be the first to cross the border. And we wound up with the largest demonstration anybody down there had seen yet of truck blockages and so on. We had a highway blockage that ran across the tracks and on off over the hill. And they came into the town and double parked everywhere, blocked both entrances to the village so that in the event that we needed to get our fire truck out or something, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So we had experience with the blockage. And I had visions of what was going to happen here as well.
And my understanding is that wasn't a protest. That was just a number of people trying to cross the border at the same time.
I did a lot of protesting, but no, it wasn't a protest.
Thank you. I understand. So if we can just pull up for reference COU 183. I understand that on that same day, January 27th, you wrote to the Premier Kenny of Alberta and the Solicitor General, Sonia Savage, to advise them that you had heard about this risk of a blockade, correct?
That's correct.
And I understand someone called you the next day in response to this email?
Yes, I received a call from the Solicitor General's office. I do not know the name of the person. I remembered the name Pilgrim, and nobody by that name has ever worked for the government of Alberta that I can find. So I'm not sure who I spoke to. Anyway, saying to the effect that I had woken everybody up around there, that they had been in contact then with the police of all flavors, and they were going to RCMPs on top of it, and we've got it under control, basically. It's what I remember.
So my understanding is that you observed on January 29th the convoy driving up to the border, correct?
Yeah, me and everybody in town, I think, were out to see what was going on.
And can you maybe just tell us what you observed on that day?
Well, about what I expected. I'd seen convoy demonstrations by other groups on television and online. A lot of trucks, a lot of signs, a lot of honking, and it was a convoy, a parade of vehicles from half tons to no monster trucks, but large tractor trailers.
And that pinpoint, that checkpoint 4 that we looked at before on the map, that's where you saw them begin to U-turn to head back towards Milk River?
Yeah, that's Highway 500, and it's a major crossing point that comes up from over the tracks out of to the east of the village, and then makes a crossing there with Highway 4. So it's the first place that you could really make a U-turn, or the last place, I guess, if you're coming from the north, it's the last place you could make a U-turn, either there or our next exit, and it was smaller. So the RCMP, I think, had decided this was the best place to turn everybody around.
And my understanding from your witness statement is that about 45 minutes later, you observed that they had blocked that intersection where they were U-turning. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the RCMP told me 42 minutes, but it happened, yeah.
And how many RCMP vehicles did you observe that day?
Again, there's a lot going on, so I didn't sit there and count, but I saw half a dozen vehicles. They escorted the convoy down and made sure that they made that U-turn. And that's what happened. The vehicle started turning and going back up the road. So I saw maybe 6, 10 at the most RCMP vehicles.
And did you ever hear about anything about it being a splinter group or something like that that had caused the blockade?
Not
A
in those
splinter group
terms, no.
from the group that had organized the convoy.
I knew from what I was reading, again, I spend way too much time online, but knew from what I was reading in social media that there were other groups coming and joining up. At that time, I naively believed that it was all about the mandates that had been put on, well, the removal of the, you'll have to forgive me, I do this once in a while. I thought that it had to do with cross-border truckers having their permissions removed. For 2 years, they'd been traveling back and forth, exempt from vaccination requirements and so on. And just when things were starting to loosen up, I mentioned the 18th, people are starting to go across and everybody's getting more normal feel. Suddenly, the federal governments in both Canada and the US decided that you no longer have an exemption, you're going to have to be vaccinated. And I think that was the tipping point. So I thought everybody was coming for that purpose.
Okay.
Long question, long answer.
That's okay. You told us in your interview that the RCMP appeared to be caught off guard by the blockade. How did you come to that conclusion?
Well, at that 42-minute mark, when the trucks drove into the median and across both lanes of traffic going both directions, it became obvious that nobody was in control. Nothing happened other than flashing lights and talking to the guys, and it came to a standstill, and that was it.
Mr. Van Hugenbos yesterday told us that on January 31st, the protesters let some commercial vehicles through, commercial vehicles that had been waiting at the blockade since the time it had become blockaded. Are you aware of that, of commercial vehicles being let through on the 31st?
Yes. I have a vantage point in my house where I can see what's going on the highway. And we had been worried about these people sitting there, their loads, the refrigerated trucks, and observed them going along, talking to them, and some of the vehicles being let to leave.
Thank you. I understand that you had regular communications by phone and text with Minister Sani, the former Minister of Transport for the province, correct?
That's correct.
So we'll pull up your text messages with her and go through some of those. That's COU 6016. And we'll start on the second page, I believe. So in here, this is February 2nd at 12:41 p.m. Minister Sani, says, I'm sorry this is happening. Please take care. I'm working on this nonstop. What did you understand her and the Alberta government to be doing at this time to respond to the protests at this early stage?
Well, I understood her position, not just from text so much, we had phone calls as well. She was working both sides, trying to talk to the people who'd organized the protest, and also with the provincial administration to get some kind of action happening. She's responsible for, or was responsible at this time, for seeing that that traffic flow works. I mean, that's our lifeline in Alberta. And so she's pulling out all stops, talking to anybody she can. I know she talked to truckers, she talked to Marco, I have trouble with his last name, but he'll forgive me. Anyway, with the contact people for the convoy, anybody that she could talk to. So I, knowing the minister the way I do and the dedication that she shows for her position, it means just what it says. She's working on it nonstop.
And so your understanding is that she was trying to negotiate some kind of resolution.
Yes.
If we can go a bit lower. Okay. So here we see at 6:16 on February 3rd, you asked Minister Sawney whether she was willing to come to Coots to meet the protesters. You recall that?
Yes.
And the response is, of course, I just have to get clearance from the boss and the RCMP. Did she ever come to meet the protesters?
No, she did not. She got as far as Lethbridge and didn't get permission to come farther south.
And you understood that to be permission from who?
The provincial government.
Okay. Did you ever receive an explanation for why that permission wasn't granted?
No.
And why did you believe that it would be helpful for her to come to Coots?
We thought at the very first that it would be convenient because, as I said, she's responsible for transportation, and this is a transportation-related blockade. She thought that possibly she could come and talk to people and explain to them that the importance of having that corridor continue and stop all the madness. I mean everybody was caught flat-footed, and we're trying everything we could to get it going. So she was willing to come down and talk to whoever to make things happen, to get it opened up.
Thank you. If we can go down a little bit to the next page. A little bit lower. Okay. At 7:21 on February 3rd, you say the second line, they've closed the highway down again. It was open briefly. A few commercial vehicles did go through, then someone barricaded the highway again. So can you maybe give us a sense of how often, it seems to me that the highway was reopening at times. We see later in your text messages that some traffic was trickling through. How often was the highway completely blockaded?
You would have had to stand there and watch to be able to tell. It would be open, we'd see a truck or two or three go through, and then the next thing you know, well, it's closed again. And the whole idea, I think, that at this point that they were trying to do was to open up a single lane each way and keep traffic flowing. But it was, well, you saw my mentioned here earlier, they're trying to find a leader. At that time, there were several different groups. It was mob rule, I guess, I don't like that expression, but that's the idea. There was nobody really able to just get everybody together and say, okay, we're going to do this, and everybody would go out and do it. And so that's what was happening. We had traffic and then we didn't have traffic.
And you're attributing that to the lack of leadership in the group at that time.
At that time, yeah, there was no cohesive structure that I could see.
And I think if you go down a little bit more, you'll see those comments that you just mentioned, still some mob rule going on, hoping they have an established command structure soon. You visited Smuggler's Saloon and met with some protesters on February 3rd.
Yes, I did.
And did you observe for yourself this lack of leadership at that time?
I did. I talked to Alex Van Herk, who turned out being one of the people that became a de facto leader, I guess. And the expression, I've heard it used here before, talking about other places, it was like herding cats. Him trying to get some order out of the chaos that was going on. There's video that exists of him talking to people and trying to get them to listen to him and being shouted down, because that was the nature of the beast at the time.
Okay. If we could go to page 10 of this document. So this is February 5th at 2:16. So you see that second bubble, you say, now that Marco seems to have established control, it might be good for someone to talk about provincial mandates. And then if we go just down just a little bit, she responds, let's chat later. So is your understanding that at this time on February 5th, a clearer leadership structure was emerging in the group?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have a discussion with Minister Sani regarding provincial mandates at that time?
It's quite possible. We had phone calls in here, but you've seen how good my memory is. I know we talked about it from time to time, what could be done and what was being done. But I'm under oath and I can't say for sure.
Okay, thank you. If we can go just a bit, just to page 12, and this is February 5th at 11:59. So just a bit lower till we get to 11:59. There we go. Here you tell Minister Sani the messaging to the protesters needs to be controlled better. There seems to be conflicting messages being circulated as true. You recall that?
Yes.
And what was the problem with the messaging at that time as you understood it?
The feeling that I was getting was that someone was building up hopes that things are going to happen on a provincial level very quickly, and the premier is going to announce that all the mandates are off. We knew government doesn't work that quickly. Premier Kenney was, the old expression, caught between a rock and a hard place. He's definitely there because, well, we know all the stuff that goes on. He was working to remove as many mandates as possible, as quickly as possible. But a lot of these people were being told that there was going to be a caucus meeting and they were going to drop all the mandates. And don't know where that came from exactly.
If we can go to page 14, it's February 6th at 2:40 p.m. So you say that you talked to Mayor Fader, and I believe that's the mayor of Fort McLeod, is that
That's
right?
correct.
And Glenn Motz, who's a federal MP, correct?
He's our MP for that, yeah, for that writing.
And you say you talked to them about Marco. Marco was not in favor of the illegal action and has been working to move toward a legal protest. And when you say moving towards, working towards a legal protest, did you understand that to be opening one lane each way?
Yes.
And were those efforts successful?
Again, it depends on the time of day and which way the wind was blowing. Sometimes it was successful. My son came down from Edmonton one day, from Calgary rather, came down from Calgary one day. And after he got through the checkpoint in Milk River, he drove into Coots. He said, there's no trucks out there. So they were shifting and moving things around. So sometimes the road was open and sometimes it wasn't.
Thank you. If we can go to page 15, February 7th at 10:20, I believe it's at the bottom of the page. So Minister Sani says, I heard the blockade is back up. And you respond, we could go to the next page, I believe. You say, yep, tractors just now, highway is blocked. If we keep going. She says, I guess they were hoping for an announcement today. Was your understanding that this tractor blockade on February 7th was because of frustrations associated with the lack of an anticipated announcement, as you were just mentioning?
That's the word that I got from talking to someone else, that they'd been expecting the announcement to come down that all the mandates were off. And again, this is from misinformation they were getting from somewhere. And when they didn't, they blocked the road again.
And this is a member of the protest who told you this?
Yes.
So the next day on February 8th, Premier Kenney announced a plan for the gradual easing of pandemic-related health orders. Did that have any impact on the blockade?
Not by then. As I said, they had been told and led to believe that everything was going to come off, and obviously it didn't. And so those people who chose not to understand how government works decided they're going to show us. So blocked it again.
We can go to page 19. This is on February 8th. We can go down a little bit, down a bit more. So you say need access to some land, no construction. And then on page 20, if we can skip down, Minister Sani says, I'm glad we could help you out with the land parcel. Was that in connection with the plot of land for the legal protest site that was established in Milk River?
Yes. Yes, I'd been in the meeting in Milk River with the mayor from Milk River, Reeves from the county of Warner, some representatives from, trying to think who else was in there. Anyway, we had a meeting and a discussion of where to have an alternate parcel of land. The Milk River people and the county determined that there was Queensland available. And so I happened to have the contact information for the Minister of Transport who could make that happen. And that's what happened here. I gave her the note that they'd be calling her. They did. She made things happen so we could get that parcel.
And did you understand, was there any buy-in from protesters on moving the protest to that site?
No, at that time, there wasn't a great deal of interest in moving from the highway to a plot of land just beside the highway.
And I understand though that once the blockade in Coots came to an end, there is a group that moved to that site.
Yes.
Is that correct? And they
Yep.
stayed there for a number of weeks.
For a long time, it looked like a unhoused encampment.
So let's go to page 26, February 14th at 12:42 p.m. So Minister Sani asks you, are there people still there at the blockade? You respond, oh yeah, nobody's leaving yet. It's all fake news. So your understanding at that time was that the protesters were not leaving yet, correct?
That's correct. I didn't hear until later in the afternoon that things were changing.
And what did you hear that afternoon?
Sometime in the afternoon or early evening, I think it was my contact with RCMP, Corporal Peters let me know that they'd been notified the thing was coming to an end.
So you were told by the RCMP that they had been notified by protesters that day that they would be leaving the site?
Yeah.
And I understand you had a conversation with Mr. Jory Evans, who was a protester about that
Yes.
as well. When did you have the conversation with him about this decision to end the blockade?
Sometime on the 14th, but I don't, without pulling it up, I don't have the exact time. Well, I'm not sure times are on there or not. Yeah, we were in contact quite a bit that day. Jory, I still don't know his real position in the group, but he was doing a lot of videoing. He had a blog online and so on called PB&J. Just kind of a news summary of what was going on, what they knew, what they didn't know. And he and I had established a rapport early on and communicated back and forth. Obviously nothing confidential, but talking about stuff. And so he had let me know that day, first of all, contacted me to know if I knew how to contact the person who had been arrested. And then we went on from there. And he talked about the guns, or the arrest and the guns. Guns are all fake, but the fact that people don't want anything to do with it. And
So he explained to you that day that he spoke to you about the RCMP's arrest, and did he explain to you that that was one of the reasons why the protesters had decided to leave?
yeah, that's the feeling I got. I don't know if he actually said that or not. in my mind at this point in the time, it's, well, yeah, that's what he said, but unless I see it in writing, I'm not going to say for sure. I got that feeling though that because of what had happened, that the mood in the crowd had changed and they were going to depart. So
Okay. And was your understanding that the agreement was that they would, or that their intention was to leave the next morning?
yes,
And did you observe them leave the morning of the 15th?
I did actually. You know,
And so no enforcement was required by the RCMP at that time to get them to leave?
no, on the night of the 14th, they lined up all their vehicles down the street. We have a auction firm out there called Ritchie Brothers that auction off from time to time a lot of agricultural equipment. And I said it looked like the biggest sale that Ritchie Brothers ever had because they were all lined up down the street. And it was mostly tractors. At that point, there weren't a lot of trucks around. But anyway, they lined up down the street on the 14th and I received the word they're going to go at 10, and 10 o'clock they were gone. Well, they left.
And so you're not aware of any enforcement powers available under the Emergencies Act being used to clear the blockade then?
No, that had nothing to do with it.
When you met with the protesters on at Smuggler's Saloon on February 3rd, did they explain to you what their plan was, what their objective was?
No, there was no, I talked to Alex briefly in the back room, just off the main floor there. And I've never seen a man look so haggard and beat as he did at that time. I don't know if I got there just after he had tried to talk to people. Marco says he was there, but Marco was avoiding me. So anyway, he's on video talking about we should, as one, leave and getting shouted down. So I don't know if I talked to him just after that or not, but no, there was no, I've talked so long I forgot the question.
I was asking you about February 3rd when you
Yeah.
attended the Smuggler's Saloon. Did you get a sense that they had an exit strategy?
Oh, at that time, no. No, the feeling that I got was from talking to a couple of other people in the crowd was, no, we're here till mandates are off. That was.
If we could go to COU 6012, these are your Facebook messages with Mr. Evans. And I'd like to go to page 2. We can go down a little bit. Okay, so here he tells you, and I think this is in the context of the mandates, the provincial mandates, yeah, they keep ignoring, and these guys want to get this shit done and go home. Also connected with the group that closed down Windsor, Ontario today, and things are going crazy in Ottawa. So it adds flames to that fire over there. In your discussions with Mr. Evans, did you ever understand that were the protesters in Coots in communications with protesters in Ottawa or Windsor? What was your understanding of that?
This is my understanding of that. I have no other, we never talked about it otherwise.
Okay, so this text message is this text message
That's
is
it,
all
yeah.
you have. Okay, thank you. I understand that Mr. Evans told you about concerns he had with respect to more extreme elements participating in the protest. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we had a meeting where I talked for quite a bit, for 45 minutes or so. And one of the things if you go back far enough in my history, bear with me, go back far enough in my history, I worked in mining in northern Manitoba, was a steelworker steward, went through wildcat strikes and so on. And there were always hardline guys and then the guys that were there for a good time. You could have a wildcat strike and everybody's up and up and up, and then it tapered off and you wound up with the core, and you might even find guys that you'd never seen before there. And we talked about how that was a danger, and if something like this, the longer it went on, the more the opportunity existed for outside elements to come in and cause disruption.
And he agreed with
And he agreed with that. That was one of his concerns.
Did you yourself observe the nature of the protest changing over time?
The mood changed. I talked about somewhere it being almost like a big community meeting of all the farmers in the area. And this was, don't kid yourself to think this is a big trucker protest. This is mostly a farm protest.
I think you, in your witness statement, you say that about your meeting on February 4th.
Yeah. And, you know, they had their kids there, and it was just a family thing. As it went on, a lot of that attitude disappeared. Didn't see a lot of kids playing hockey anymore. And and if you followed their social media, they took a picture when it was all over or just before they left, which was handy for anybody investigating, but a picture of the whole group in front of smugglers, and it wasn't a large group at that time. It had gotten smaller. But to go back to my strike days, it's the same thing. That as the longer you do something like this and you go in expecting results right away and it doesn't happen, the more disheartened you become. And then you start listening to other things about, well, if we only did this, this would happen, and so on. So it's just it's a typical demonstration. And while I didn't have a crystal ball, if I had, it would have paid off, because what we feared seems to have happened.
Did you observe any violence or harassment during the protest?
Never did, no.
Did you yourself receive any threats?
Yes, I got one death threat online, Facebook. Serious enough that the RCMP took it seriously. I'm not sure how good a threat it was, because it was sent from a personal page. But anyway, it was a death threat, and I received calls. Everybody gets phone calls. Just the phone and hang up, or phone and, yeah, you thought you wanted to be mayor, you know, and click. That kind of stuff. I had people out front taking pictures of my house, and It was first time I've done this, so it was a little nerve-wracking.
Thank you. Did you ever observe any weapons yourself around that time in Coutts?
No, we didn't. Some of the protesters were staying in the motel across the road from where I live, and we saw from time to time them moving heavy hockey bags, and my wife said, "It's guns," but we we had no weapons that I ever witnessed.
Did you ever hear anything about efforts by protesters to dissuade tow truck drivers from assisting the RCMP?
Not directly. Social media, I saw what was going on, but I never directly talked to anyone.
Did you ever have any discussions with CBFC officials about the protest?
Never did. Well, other than see somebody at the post office or something. Some of them live there.
I understand that the RCMP attended a village council meeting on February 8th. And in your summary, you state that they described their responses building the airplane while you're flying it. What did you understand those comments to be referring to?
Well, just the way it sounds. As I said, we all got caught flat-footed. Nobody had expected this to happen. And I'm not sure of his rank, but anyway, the answer to the question was, we're building the airplane as we're flying it. We're making it up as we go along. We've got tactics and we're trying them, and if they don't work, we try something else until we find out how it works. It was an education, I guess, for everyone.
Thank you. In the short time we have left, I'd just like to talk about the impact on the village and its residents. In the summary, you say that the blockade greatly disrupted everyday life for Coutts residents. Could you maybe explain to us in what ways?
I have done a mental survey, and I think I had about a 70-30 split in the village, the 30 on my side and the 70 supporting the protest, regardless of what it meant. We still have neighbors that won't talk to each other because of the protests. They didn't get out and do. We had a lot of sympathetic people in the village who figured it was our duty to feed everybody. If they need a room, give them a room. These are all good people, and we should really look after them. As unneighborly and heartless as it seems, my opinion was, if you came down to here and you've blockaded the highway and now you're not wanting to leave the protest, but you need your medication that you left at home, the road goes that way, go get your medication. Instead of making a public scene about, I don't have my medicine, can you bring it to me? We don't have food, you know. You got food at home. That was my answer to those kind of complaints. My neighbors, being good rural Alberta people, figure if somebody's in need, you look after them regardless of how they got there, I guess. And there was a lot of sympathy over and as I said, the driving force of the protest, the original cause had to do with cross-border vaccination. And then mutated into my body, my right, my, all of the different conspiracy things that have gone on.
How,
And then people didn't let that go. And so it still exists to this day.
how significantly did the protests interfere with residents' ability to access services in Milk River?
Depended on the person, how comfortable they were with driving past monster pieces of equipment. I think we heard Marco yesterday talk about how one tractor is intimidating, even if it's sitting still, if you haven't been around them. When you get a whole row of them, some of them idling, you've got trucks, big pieces of equipment, and you're out there in your little Prius wanting to go up to Milk River to get groceries, it can be very intimidating. Other people who have a lot of retired farmers, it didn't bother them that much. Had one guy just the other day say, "You're going to testify, be sure you tell them we were never blocked in. Could always make it up there. Had to drive through the field a couple of times, but we weren't really blockaded." So it depended on the person and how they could handle it. And it affected some people. I have a friend who is a veteran of Afghanistan, and she has PTSD. They had to leave town because it triggered her PTSD and she just couldn't take it. They're back now. Older people, had one lady who would, if somebody drove her out for a doctor's appointment or something, she would curl up in a ball. Wasn't gonna do this. But just depends on the person, how they grew up, what their situations are. Some people it really bothered.
Thank you. Did you hear any reports of intimidation of some of your residents by protesters?
A couple, and you take it as, take everything with a grain of sand, grain of salt. Had a couple of people tell me that they were coming back into Coots and being stopped by protesters and saying, they'd say to the guy, "Well, what do you think? Should we let these people through or not? Or should let this guy through? And, where do you think you're going?" And that kind of thing. But nothing, we had a situation where a neighbor, someone decided it'd be funny to tell everybody that there were free showers at her house. So she had people showing up at the door, that kind of thing. But not a lot of, there was no physical intimidation. And it was basically just the going through the gauntlet to get out of the village. Like I said, if you drove through and up the highway and through the ditch, maybe, well, you could go. So.
Lastly, I just wanted to ask you, was there any impact on emergency services or access to emergency services?
For the most part, no. When it first happened, it was like when we had the RVs or the entrances, they said they wouldn't block it. You have to understand, we depend on the ambulance coverage from Milk River, the medical clinic there. We have a volunteer fire department, we have volunteer EMS, and you'd have to understand AHS to know the health services to know why we have an ambulance that we can't use. But anyway, we have one. We cover our fire department that is a rural fire department that covers everything out in the surrounding area, especially to the east. There's only that road at 501, which is the road that crosses the tracks to get out to there. That was one of my major concerns, was that we had egress quickly in the event of an emergency, and then that we could get an ambulance in. The RCMP ran an ambulance down the highway to test that, and the protesters were able to clear it through quickly. So it was handled, but for the first few hours, there wasn't any awareness on the part of the people. I said more than once, I got the impression that the protesters, Coots was an afterthought. They wanted to plug the highway and, oh gee, there's 250 people over here, and we kind of affected them too. So it took us a while to work that out, but no, after everybody was made aware, things were fairly good.
Thank you so much. Those are my questions.
Yep.
Mayor Willett, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so first up is the Government of Canada, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Mayor Willett.
Good morning.
My name is Andrea Gonsalves, and I'm one of the lawyers representing the Government of Canada in this inquiry. Thank you for being here today. I just have a few questions for you. And I want to start by talking about the port of entry at Coots. And I understand on the other side of the border is the town of Sweetgrass. Yes?
Sweetgrass. Yes.
Yeah. That port of entry, you'll agree with me, is of vital importance to not only the Coots community, Milk River, the surrounding communities, but also the province of Alberta and Canada as a whole.
Yes.
I understand that Highway 4 is the primary access to that port of entry, although there's one side road that's not suitable for commercial vehicles, right?
Correct.
And it's the only designated commercial port of entry in all of Alberta?
Yeah, it's the only 24-hour port, yes.
Right. That port of entry allows for the cross-border transport of livestock, agricultural goods, and other imports and exports that are critical to Alberta's supply chain and economy. Yes?
Yes.
You can see, I assume from really your front door, the constant flow of trucks that are carrying billions of dollars worth of goods north and south across that border.
Yes.
Now, you've told us that you learned early on of plans to, that there were plans in the works for protesters to engage in slow roll protests in the vicinity of the Coots Port of Entry.
That's correct.
And those quickly evolved into plans to actually block the highway to the border.
Yes.
That would have really a twofold impact on the people of Coots, both their access north into Milk River and the amenities there, right?
Yeah.
As well as south down across the border. And so I would expect this raised some alarms for you as mayor of this village.
Yes.
Yeah, and you acted quickly to communicate to residents how they could best prepare themselves, right? You sent out that little notice.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it's COU 701. I don't think we need to pull it out unless you want to look at it. But you were trying to best equip your residents for the unknown of what was going to come, right?
That's correct.
And that notice included advice like pretending that they live in a big city.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
With the risk of giving too much away, a lot of people don't lock their doors. You might have a car that you know so-and-so needs to borrow. You'll put the keys in the car. We've got a almost 0% crime rate because of our location and because of the fact that CBSA people live there and the guy that you broke into might have a gun. So just people get very comfortable with it's typical small town Alberta.
And there were folks coming in that nobody knew.
Yep.
And you were concerned that that might pose a safety and security risk to the people of Coots.
Yeah, it's, like I tell a lot of people, you're driving south, getting ready to hit the border, you don't even know Coots is there. And although we can watch and wave. And if you've got a stranger in town, word gets around, so, you know, there's a car going around and I don't know who it belongs to, and oh, that's so-and-so, they're visiting so-and-so, you know. The telegraph works very well. And all of a sudden we're going, with the potential existed that we're going to have massive influx of people driving up and down the streets, and I just wanted everybody to be careful. Don't let your kids out to run across to the playground because somebody might be coming, not looking for kids there. Everybody in town knows your kids live there, but if they come in from out of town, they don't. Just a heightened awareness, I guess, of your situation.
Okay, and another step you took in the early stages was to reach out to the provincial government.
Yes.
We saw in your examination by Commission Counsel the January 27th email that you wrote to Solicitor General Savage to advise of the planned protest. You recall
Yeah.
that? And one of the things you mentioned in that email, you raised the possibility of the situation being dealt with using Alberta's Critical Infrastructure Protection Act. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I understand that was raised on January 29th in a letter you sent to the Minister of Justice, and on January 30th in an email to Premier Kenney. Do you recall those communications?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll just note for the record, but we don't have to pull them up. It's COU 705 and COU 706. And in your understanding, that legislation was really purpose-built for this kind of thing.
Exactly.
Now, you've spoken a bit about the disruptions that the blockade of the highway caused for the people of Coots. And I just wanted to pull up some photos. It's pb.nsc.can 408500_rel.301. You mentioned that you did travel to the protest sites on occasion. I just want to confirm that these photos reflect or similar to what you recall seeing when you were there.
Apologies, could you repeat that document ID, please?
Yeah, the whole thing. pb.nsc.can.408500_rel.301. And we'll begin, please, at page 4. Now, this is an RCMP document, so I wouldn't expect you've seen the document before. It's just the photos. Is that a picture of the blockade at Coots? Best you can recognize? Or up on Highway 4?
Bear with me.
Let me just make that a little bigger there.
I can't place that exactly. It doesn't actually look like the Coots end of it. It looks more like the Milk River.
The Milk River end of it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the 501.
Okay, and what we see there, though, is the there are trucks parked in the median between the two directions of the highway.
Yeah, but again, this is actually not a full blockade. They're doing a slow roll through that.
That's a slow roll.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go down to page 7, please.
Okay, that's Coots.
That's Coots. Okay. And page 9.
Yeah, those are both Coots.
Okay, and let's go to page 10, please. Sorry. It's not the one I wanted. The tray, 29. Are you able to place that one? That may be checkpoint 10.
It doesn't get any bigger.
If you don't recognize it, that's okay. We'll
Yeah,
have-
I don't
others.
for sure know where I am there.
Okay, that's okay. It may be further down the highway than you were able to make your way to.
Yeah.
Now, you discussed your interactions with Corporal Curtis Peters,
Yes.
and we have those text exchanges at COU 6011. In one of your text exchanges, you asked him to speak to the school bus driver. I just want to be clear on this. Children from Coots attend school in Milk River.
That's correct.
And in this text message, you're explaining that the weather is supposed to turn bad, and you were concerned about her traveling on the highway and folks having to navigate the field to drop off and retrieve their kids. Can you just explain that concern?
Yeah, the school bus driver was a little concerned with coming through the blockade. And so what she had offered as a solution was to come basically the back way on a county road up to Patty Joe's that we talked about. But the fact is that you have to drive either through there or through the field, and she didn't feel comfortable taking the bus through there. So what she had suggested was that the people in town who had kids would bring them all out and meet her on the county road. And that's what that was.
Okay. You also mentioned in your text to Corporal Peters that folks on home care in Coots had not been visited since the blockade started.
That's correct.
And that was one of your concerns.
It was.
I want to pull up, please, COU 702. This is a text exchange you had with Bill Graveland, and that's who?
I'm sorry.
Bill Graveland?
Oh, Bill Graveland, yeah. He is a reporter for Canadian Press.
Okay. And if we go to page 3, please. Just scrolling down there. Okay, stop there. In the first blue box, your text says, "Morning, Bill. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You need to find someone in a protected position to call these guys what they are. Domestic terrorists. Won't be me. They're right outside my window. I would be strung up." Literally, just a thought. Why did you describe the protesters as domestic terrorists?
Well, unlike most of the people in the front rows here, I'm a Google lawyer. So when I look for the definition of a domestic terrorist, these people seem to fit that bill, and yet no one ever labeled them that. And so I just floated the idea out there, one side to Bill, on the other side to Minister Sani, that maybe they should be called that to get a little more attention.
You felt they were terrorizing people by their behavior.
Because they were causing harm to the country.
Yeah. And if we go down to page 4, If we could scroll down a little bit more, just pause there. Sorry, again, a little bit further down. My note may be off. There's a text where you, if we could just go back up, let me try again. Up a little more. Yeah, okay, I'm not seeing it. There's a text in this collection where you say that a more extreme element has moved in and I am concerned about the final outcome. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yep.
Yeah. In your interview summary, you spoke about a sermon delivered on February 3rd at the Smuggler's Saloon by a pastor, Arthur Pulowski.
Yes.
And he, have you seen that sermon? Whether in,
Yes.
yes?
Yes, I have.
Could we please pull up pb.can.40s, I hope this is right, 1845_rel.0001.
Was that pb.can.40s1845?
I hope so.
Is it a multimedia file?
Yes. Yeah. While we're digging that up, that sermon, I understand, was delivered on a day when MLA Hunter had told you he had negotiated a deal with protesters to open up one lane of traffic. You recall that?
I think that's right. Yeah.
And in a text message to Minister Sawney, you described this sermon as being inciting.
As being
Inciting.
inciting, yes.
Yeah. And in your interview summary, you said that it strengthened the protesters' resolve. You recall that?
Yep.
I'm hoping we can just watch a few.
Sorry, having difficulty locating that one.
Okay. Want to come back to it. You told us that you also received a death threat, other threats, and that a truck was parked outside your house taking photos of it, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's fair to say that as time is going on, frustration is increasing, as is concern over how this may end, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And your efforts to engage higher levels of government were focused really on the province of Alberta.
That's correct.
Did you ever receive any explanation for why the province did not make use of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act as you had suggested?
No, I did not. But you have to remember, I'm the mayor of a small village. I'm kind of at the bottom of the ladder. So I was not privy to everything that was going on.
Okay. And I now have the correct reference for that video. It's pb.can.40s135. 1835. 1835. And Mary, while we're waiting for that to be pulled up in the few minutes I have left, you're aware that what was going on in Coutts was not isolated, right? There were also border blockades,
Yes,
the
yes.
port of entry at
Yeah.
Emerson,
Yep.
Ambassador Bridge in Windsor,
Yep.
Pacific Highway near Surrey, BC.
Yes.
Of course, the occupation of the city of Ottawa. And get that video.
You said 1835?
1835, yeah. And you said earlier, I thought I heard your evidence that in some respects, it was a typical demonstration, but of course, as time went on, you wouldn't describe the Coutts border blockade as being a typical demonstration.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry, just to step in, David Cherokee, Counsel for the Government of Canada. I believe that there's, it's pb.can.
Yeah.
.401835. I think there may have been an NSC in the
Oh, is that my mistake?
previous reading, but there's no NSC. It's just
No
pb.can.
Thank you, Mr. Cherokee.
It is here. I just need to download it. It'll just be a moment.
Okay, thank you. I think I can do the rest of my questions and come back to that. And of course, you're aware, Mayor, that ultimately search warrants were carried out the morning of February 14th.
Yes,
And a cache of weapons and body armor was seized.
yes,
And there were a number of arrests made, right?
yes,
And you were informed, in addition to these arrests, an attempt was made by a vehicle to ram a police vehicle.
yep.
Again, we don't have to pull it up while Mr. Clerk is doing me another favor, but the email to you about those arrests is COU 50453. And even with those arrests, I think I understood your evidence that it took some time for the protesters to clear out.
Well, sometime it happened on the 14th and they left on the 15th, yeah.
Right, and that was after the Emergencies Act had been invoked, right?
Just barely, yeah.
And you mentioned in your witness summary, you understood there were rumors circulating among the protesters that the Emergencies Act would be invoked, and among other things, their bank accounts could be frozen, right?
Yep, again, that was social media, but yes.
Okay, so Mr. Commissioner, I'm just waiting for that video to load.
Apologies, just one more moment.
That's okay, it's my fault. And we'll just play from the beginning, not the whole thing, but just.
People in my country in 1980, finally they said our children are worth fighting for. Yes. And they did it, and they took it to the streets, and they paralyzed the entire system. Yes, thousands were arrested. They gained control. Yes, people were tortured and beaten. Yes. There is a price attached to freedom. How do you think the Second War ended? Millions had to die. How do you think the First War ended? Millions had to die. And that's the price that we have to be willing to pay if our children are going to have a free and democratic society. Yeah. This is our time. For 2 years, we have been dancing polka with them. For 2 years, we have been trying our best to reason with the villains. But I know villains. See, bully will never stop bullying. He will keep stealing from you all the time. They have big appetites, those greedy dogs.
We can pause that there.
You have
Thank
power.
you. Mayor Willett, is that video of the sermon that Pastor Pulowski delivered at the Smuggler's Saloon on February 3rd?
It is, yes.
And that's the video you understand was, or you've described as inciting the crowd and the
Yeah.
protesters. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Commissioner, for the indulgence.
Okay, thank you. Next is the government of Alberta.
Of Alberta, can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Perfect. Good morning, Mayor Willett. I have a few questions for you.
Good morning.
Can
Clerk,
you
if you
just
could
identify
please,
yourself for the record? You may have, but it didn't come across.
of course, Commissioner, Hana Laura Yamamoto for the province of Alberta. Mr. Clerk, if you could please bring up WTS 6012. It's been up before. This is your witness statement. And just while that's coming up, so on page 5, you stated that you did not receive the type of support you expected from the provincial and federal governments. So what kind of support did you expect from the federal government?
Well, at that point, it seemed like we were not getting anywhere, and I was looking for somebody to do something to get the highway unblocked and get things happening again. So any kind of support would have been make them go away and make this end. I wasn't in a position to say exactly who should do what, but somebody should appear to be doing something. And at this time, it didn't look like anybody was doing much.
And so I have the same question with respect to the provincial government. What kind of support did you expect from the provincial government?
Same story. We had as I mentioned before, an act that was supposed to give unlimited powers basically to protect infrastructure and remedy this exact problem. And yet it appeared to me nothing was going on. Now, I've seen the situation reports since then, and it showed that there was action in the background, but I wasn't privy to that. So where I was sitting in my office looking out the window, I didn't see anything happening.
Okay, so now that you say that there's things that you saw going on in the background, in your opinion, is that statement still true that you believe that the provincial government should have made better use of the Critical Infrastructure Act?
I guess it goes back to the statement that the RCMP made to me about building the airplane as we're flying it. I understand that the province was in the same situation, like looking for tow trucks and that kind of thing. So probably my opinion is not as harsh as it was at the time. I believe the province was doing more than was visible to me and most people. There were things going on that were, if we'd gone a little farther down the road, no pun intended, if we'd gone a little farther down the road, there would have been actual physical action taken. So my opinion has changed a bit.
Thank you, Mayor. So you understand as well that the RCMP was the lead agency responsible for responding to the border blockade occurring at Coutts, and they would make the operational plans and decisions?
I don't know, was my ears playing tricks or not? Can you do that a little slower, please?
I apologize. I should slow down for the translator as well. So you understand that the RCMP would have been the lead agency responsible for responding to the border blockades occurring at Coutts, and they would have made the operational plans and decisions.
Correct.
Okay. And you worked with the RCMP throughout this blockade?
We were in contact all the time, yeah.
So Mr. Clerk, if I could have you pull up ALB 50908.0001. So what you're going to see here is a statement from the Alberta Minister of Justice and Solicitor General Savage on February 8th, 2022. Now, the 4th and 5th paragraphs from the bottom is just where we want to go. Perfect. And it says, those participating in this illegal blockade could potentially face charges or actions under any number of laws, including, and it includes the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, and goes on to say, whatever action law enforcement may take is at their independent discretion. I trust the authorities to lay appropriate charges wherever the evidence provides reasonable grounds to do so. So based on that statement, do you now understand that it's the RCMP that would have made decisions whether or not to undertake enforcement under the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act?
Correct. I understand that.
We saw your texts with Minister Sawney. We don't have to pull them up, but those would be under COU 6016. So these texts show contact every day, often multiple times a day from February 2nd to 18th, as well as you said you had phone calls with Minister Sawney?
Yes.
Okay. And you also had a phone call with the Premier?
I did.
And at no time did you make requests for specific supports or assistance from the province?
I think we, when I talked to the Premier, we talked more in generalities. As I said earlier, he was kind of caught in a pinch point between darned if I do and darned if I don't. We talked about that. He talked about the fact that he could only do so much because of the lack of surge capacity in the hospitals. He mentioned that he was going to be talking to governors in the northern states to see if they would put pressure on that side, because even if we did get rid of the provincial mandates, the federal mandates still sat there, and that was the thing that triggered the whole deal in the first place. So no, it was more a generality thing. I did not hit him up for any kind of action.
But based on that conversation, there were things that the Alberta government was doing to support removing the border blockade at Coutts.
And again, I only caught about half of that. I'm deaf in one ear and I can't hear in the other one. So
I apologize. I'll slow down and speak up. And based on that conversation with Premier Kenney, Alberta was providing supports, even if you weren't asking for specific supports, correct?
yes.
And you had wanted Minister Sawney to speak with protesters?
It was not my suggestion, it was her suggestion. She thought that she could come and talk to people in the first day or two because she was getting feedback from the fact that there are truckers stuck. She wanted to come, and I don't know what she had planned to say, but it was her suggestion that she come down.
Okay. And you had said that the protesters were like herding cats?
The protesters were letting, I'm sorry.
Were like herding cats, sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, that's what Alex told me when the first time I made contact with the guys at Smugglers. He said at that time that it was like that's my expression, but that was the impression. He said he'd get a group here and a group there and try and get them all together, and they'd make a decision. Then they'd walk out the door and forgot what they talked about. So he was very frustrated.
So there was no definitive leader of the protest?
At that point, there didn't appear to be.
And I just have one point of clarification. So in your evidence with my friend Commission Counsel, you said that tractors lined up on the side of the road on the 14th. And I just want to clarify, that's so traffic could flow?
Oh, but then they were off the highway, and I think at that point, traffic was being held up in Milk River still, but there wasn't any really physical blockading going on the morning of the 15th. Possibly on the evening of the 14th. I couldn't do 24-hour coverage. But no, the tractors were all lined up. They were just getting ready to leave as a group. And so they pulled them all in, actually pulled them into the village and down that street and lined them up along there. So they were out of the way.
Okay, and you're not sure if that was the evening of the 14th, or did that start the evening of the 14th where they were moving the tractors?
When I went down the morning of the 15th to see what was going on, they were all lined up down the street. That's all I know. I don't know exactly when. Like I say, I wasn't sitting watching them 24 hours a day, so I'm not sure when they moved.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mayor Willett. That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the City of Windsor.
Good morning,
Good
Mayor
morning.
Willett. My name is Michael Finley. I represent the City of Windsor, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is a fellow border municipality.
Yes.
And we heard today, Mayor Willett, you live just blocks away from the protest site and indeed the border, right?
No matter where you are in Coots, you're only blocks away. Yeah.
And that border crossing is an important link, true?
Definitely is.
And I think you described it earlier as a lifeline and something with larger importance than just to the village of Coots. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And I guess perhaps I'm stating the obvious, sir, but fair to say that the village of Coots doesn't have sufficient resources on its own to ensure the security of that border crossing?
No.
Or in fact, to deal with a blockade of the magnitude that you faced earlier this year?
No, our police force, as you heard, is 4 or 5 officers stationed in Milk River,
Right.
RCMP.
And so a situation like that requires more than a local response. Is that fair?
Correct.
Including, I think, as you noted earlier, provincial support
Yeah.
and federal support too.
Yeah, well, it's RCMP, so it's provincial and federal.
And so that being so, would you agree that one might benefit from having a plan or at least a framework in advance to deal with situations like the one you experienced, even if they're not exactly the same in future?
Sure. Yeah. Would be nice if the old hindsight's 2020, but it would have been nice to have a plan. Yeah.
I think you spoke about being caught flat-footed and building an airplane while it's flying. I guess we can agree you're sticking with that metaphor. It's probably better to have the plane assembled in advance before it takes to the air.
Yeah. If we're talking about police response, they had response for certain situations, but this was a situation that was unique at the time to anything they'd faced. And so I'm not going to be an apologist for the RCMP, but I think they were doing well under the circumstances. I don't think it's fair to say they had no plan. They would have had plans for demonstrations and so on, just nothing of this magnitude.
Right. And I suppose all I'm getting at is it's better in this type of circumstance. I hope you'll agree with me, when you have a multi-jurisdictional issue to deal with, to have some plan in advance to address it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. Those are all my questions.
Yep.
Thank you. Next are the convoy organizers.
Good morning, Mayor. For the
Good morning.
record, Brendan Miller, appearing as counsel for Freedom Corp, which represents the protesters that were in the city of Ottawa in January and February. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Long flight. I love driving through Coots.
Yeah.
So beautiful part of the country. So if we could please bring up, it's the document that my friends have already referred to from the federal government. It's the Canada document ending 8500 that was just up.
Apologies. Do you have the full doc ID?
Yes, I do. It is pb.nsc.can.0000850. Okay, and could we please scroll to page 32? Verse. It's just loading still. There we go. Okay. So this is the document my friend put to you. It's a PowerPoint put together by the RCMP. And there you can see that they are doing what they refer to as community engagement and talking and listening to protesters, supporters, and residents of Coots. Did you witness any of that?
Not personally.
Yeah.
Only online.
Right. But you ended up going and speaking to the protesters yourself too, didn't you?
Yes.
Right. And I understand that when you did that, you ended up doing an interview with CTV and City News about that experience. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Okay, well, let me ask you if you remember saying this. I just want to put this is a statement that's been attributed to you. I wasn't negotiating or anything else. I was just there to find out if they were as bad as some people have said, and they're certainly not. Do you remember saying that?
Sounds like something I would say, yeah.
And you remember saying this about the protesters? They're the same guys that I have for neighbors.
That was part of the uniqueness of this whole demonstration, yeah.
Right. And you also said they're the guy that owns the farm up on the hill, the guy that hauls for local businesses. Do you remember saying that?
Probably did.
Right. And this situation, I understand, polarized your community. There was, the community was essentially divided by half supporting, half against the truckers. Is that fair?
As I said earlier, probably 70-30.
70-30.
On a good day, yeah.
Right. And was that 70-30 in support, or which one was in the 30 and 70?
That would have been supporting the protest.
70%.
Hmm?
Or 30% supporting the protest?
No, 70.
70%.
Yeah.
Okay. So the majority of your town.
Majority of the town was the feeling I got.
Yeah. And there was signs up and flags of all kinds that were on residences of your town's property. Is that fair?
A few, yeah.
And can you tell me about some of the ones you saw and describe them? I know some of them were a bit vulgar, but if you'd like to.
Oh, everybody has seen them. The Trudeau flags,
The ones say F Trudeau?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Some of the Gadsden flags that don't tread on me. A lot of Canadian flags, many of them inverted, which I wholeheartedly do not approve of.
Yeah. And those flags were in your own community? being
Yeah.
Put up on the property
Yep,
of your own
a
residents?
lot of US flags. Yep.
Okay. And because you're right on the border with Montana there, right? There's a,
Mhm.
there is an intersect between the population in Montana and Coots. Is that fair?
Yep.
And can you explain, how long have you been in rural Alberta politics?
In rural Alberta politics, since I was elected to council, we had this discussion. 5 years ago.
Okay. And what's the vibe you get or the interactions you have with your residents with respect to their support or lack of support for the federal government as it currently is composed?
Well, I'll quote my CAO, Trudeau hates us. And that's basically, you could talk to anybody there. There's a great dislike for the federal government on a
Okay.
high percentage.
And what is these dislikes? What are they about? What are these people's grievances in your residence and in that area?
Genetic, I don't know how you, I've lived in Alberta for half my life, which means a long time. And I've seen this us versus them thing grow, east versus west. I spend too much time on social media. But the feeling, smarter minds than me have tried to figure it out. I really don't understand the great dislike for the federal government.
So there was, I don't know if you got the opportunity to watch. Did you watch the testimony of Ms. Tamara Litch in this proceeding? Because it was played out on TV.
I saw some of it.
Did you remember when she said that a lot of Albertans feel that they don't have a voice because the elections that are resulting in the elections of NP and the federal executive are determined before they even vote, and that they just don't feel represented in Ottawa? Do you remember hearing that?
Yeah, I think I heard that, Joe.
Is that a general grievance that you've heard some of your constituents and that you've heard some of rural Albertans and other Albertans talk about?
I believe so. Mr. Motz would probably disagree with the part that they're not represented, because he has represented us very well from that area. But I think just talking about that is a problem that anybody that has studied politics or government will agree with. The fact that you've got a mass of population concentrated in the east and you don't have in the west. And if you do just by votes, it's very difficult to feel like you're swaying anything when all of the election returns come in, and by the time you're voting, it's already been decided. So I can understand that.
And are you aware that with respect to the protests in Ottawa, it's been reported that Albertans made up the essentially almost half of the individuals that were here?
I wasn't aware of that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next is the Democracy Fund, JCCF.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
My name is Alan Honor. I'm a lawyer at the Democracy Fund. We share status with the JCCF and with Citizens for Freedom. Mayor, I think you gave evidence earlier today that Coots is the only 24-hour border crossing in Alberta. Did I understand that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and about 75 kilometers away from Coots, there's another border crossing at Del Bonita?
Yes.
And do you know if the border crossing times at Del Bonita were extended during the times of the Coots protest?
Yes, they were, I believe.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? The hours of the days they were extended?
Oh, I can't give you that without it in front of me, but I don't believe it ever went 24 hours. I know that it was increased considerably. I believe I read a number somewhere that percentage-wise, they saw crossings go up 917% or something like that. So it would have had to have been open a lot more, but I don't have the numbers.
That's fair. Thank you. I'm wondering, before the protesters left on the 15th, and before the, let me actually rephrase this. After the Emergencies Act was invoked, did you speak to any of the protesters before they left?
Not directly, no.
But you told us about rumors on social media, which referred to bank accounts being frozen. Were those social media accounts coming from the protesters?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
Well, okay, I'm not going to say 100%. Somebody could have been faking it, but there were Facebook pages called Coots Convoy Restart. And I'm not going to name them all, but they were obviously followers or participants of the protest by the content that was posted, by things that they said. And
so these were social media sites where you could sign up and you could make posts regardless of whether or not you were at the protest.
that's correct.
So anybody could have posted those rumors on that site.
Anybody could. They were moderated sites. They would have to get past the administrator, but I don't know. I didn't put them up there.
Okay. Whatever the case is, however, you would agree with me that the reason why the protesters ultimately leave, what you call the straw that broke the camel's back, was the discovery of the weapons, and it was not the rumors about the Emergencies Act.
I think that's correct. I saw an interview with Alex Van Herk that he did the evening of the 14th. It's on YouTube, where he explicitly said that it was the weapons. It wasn't the act, because they'd heard about it, but they were prepared to stay until it, that's in Ottawa, basically, is what his sympathies were.
And Alex Van Herk was one of the spokespeople, or one of the leading people at Coots among the protesters. That's
correct. He's been charged along with Marco, so I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to talk about it, but.
Okay. We'll move on. My friend from the Government of Canada brought up the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act. And I understand you thought that the RCMP should have used that act against the protesters.
I did. Part of that might have been my misunderstanding of what they were doing. As I said, I wasn't privy to the situation reports that were coming out every day until I saw them the other night. So there was stuff going on, and there possibly are even charges still waiting for people over that act. So yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think maybe would you agree with me that the RCMP may have exercised their jurisdiction under that act, or their discretion under that act, had the protest not ended when it did?
Well, I think they were doing it even as, like, I know that there were violation tickets and so on being issued, and that there possibly are still charges coming. So the process maybe doesn't move as quickly as I would like it to, but I believe they were working under that act, yes.
Okay, and I just want to ask you about that act. Is it your understanding that the act prohibits the willful obstruction of essential infrastructure if that obstruction renders the infrastructure dangerous, useless, inoperative, or ineffective?
Yes.
Okay, and in your view, that was happening in Coots because of the blockade?
Yes.
And if somebody commits an offense under that act, the police can arrest that person without a warrant. Is that right?
I'm not sure about the without a warrant, but I know they can arrest them.
But you would take it from me that the act says that.
Sure.
There are also fines under the Act.
Yes,
And does it accord with your understanding that the fine for a first offense can be no less than $1,000 and can be as much as $10,000?
I've heard that, yes.
And that a fine for a second offense or a third offense can be as high as $25,000?
Sure.
Do you know if any of the protesters at Coots were driving company vehicles? Or were parking company vehicles?
I don't know for sure. There might have been some owner operators there. I didn't see any name brand company vehicles parked there.
But some of those trucks could have been owned by corporations.
It's possible.
And it's also under the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act, someone can be fined, a corporation can be fined a minimum of $10,000 for an offense and a maximum of $200,000. Did you know that?
I may have seen those numbers. I don't know. I'll take your word for it.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Willett, do you want to add anything? We're done the cross-examinations. I'm just going to ask for whether there's any re-examination, Commission Counsel. So I'll let the re-examination go, and then I'll give you a chance to add anything if you'd like.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, okay. I just have two brief questions for you. Just to clarify a point, when you were talking about your discussion with Mr. Evans about the arrests on the 14th, I think you kind of trailed off a bit under your breath and said something about the weapons were all fake, something like that. Is that something Mr. Evans told you?
I believe he mentioned that there was a rumor they had been planted even at that early date. And then I know that YouTube video I saw of Mr. Van Herk, where he also said he didn't believe that they were real, but they were gonna, that was what was being said, so it was what happened. But yeah, that to answer your question, that's what was said.
I just want to confirm that was not your own assessment of the situation.
That was not my assessment, no.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. Do you want to add anything before you head back west?
It's cold out there. How long can I talk? No, the situation that happened there were a lot of people that said that I was against the protest. And I wanted to make it perfectly clear, I was never against the protest. You have that freedom, that right to protest anytime you want, as long as you don't break the law and interfere with my right to travel and so on. I mean, in a way, I participated in their protest because along with the other border mayors, we communicated with the federal government saying this is not right to treat these guys after the 2 years as if they suddenly become pariahs or something. So the biggest problem that I had, and I still have, understanding blocking that highway was who you thought you were damaging. You were damaging your neighbors. I had stock movers who couldn't move cattle because it was blocked. That's a whole part of a chain. People grow their stock. They plan for a particular date to deliver it to the feedlot. So they've got feed for X number of days. Now that's backed up. Now they've got to try and find feed. Well, gee, the feed comes from the other side of the border. They didn't take into consideration the fact that, yes, they made a big splash, but they were hurting the very people that they figured they were helping by getting the mandates off. We're a very agricultural area. I mentioned that I'm the chair of a regional economic development initiative. Our whole emphasis is on helping to establish that Canada Trade Corridor and the food corridor with all of the potatoes and sugar beets and pulses and all of those products. That's our main emphasis. And when you stand there with your foot on my throat and say, you're not going to go through here anymore. And what you're doing is you're actually choking the livelihood of all your friends and neighbors. And even if they sympathize with you, when they go to the grocery store and there's no fresh produce there because it's on the other side of the border, it's something to consider. So that was the main thing. And when the protests turned to an illegal blockade, they lost my support. And that's it. And I did what I did as far as the village goes because I'm responsible for those people. And I'll try and get through without breaking down here this time. But there were people it was literally, people were literally physically frozen and not able to go through that blockade. And since everything is on the other side, it was a tough situation. But we're not here to argue about that anyway. The feeling that I got, to be truthful, is, which I have to be, right, is that the federal action had very little to do with the resolution of the blockade there. I think it was the police action, the finding of the undesirable element. I know that happened. I've talked to neighbors who saw the actual police action that night. It wasn't carrying in weapons and planting them. It was a raid with SWAT type vehicles. We had a field hospital set up at the fire hall and that kind of thing. So it was a very serious situation. So and one last thing, I'm very complimentary of the police. The RCMP handled themselves very well. And I'm glad it's over. And I thank you for that opportunity.
Well, that's fine. We're here to get at the bottom of what happened, not only in Coots, but across. Can I just ask you one thing following up on you're all in favor of protests, and you'd mentioned about the land that had been set up to continue protesting, and it wasn't used until after the blockade was cleared. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
And they continued to protest there for some time, you said?
Weeks. Yeah, I don't know the exact number.
And do you know if it was the same group that had blockaded that continued to protest there?
I believe that most of that was people who had showed up for the secondary encampment and they just moved off the road because they had nowhere else to go.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming. It's appreciated. Your evidence was appreciated. You're free to go back to the cold.
Well, thanks, I think.
Okay, so we're going to take the morning adjournment, the morning break, and come back with a new witness. So we'll take 15 minutes.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission est levée pour 15 minutes. Order à l'ordre. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Commissaire. I'd like to call Mario Di Tommaso to the stand, please.
Mr. Di Tommaso, will you swear on a religious document or do you wish to affirm?
I would like to swear, please.
We have the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah available.
The Bible.
For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
Mario Di Tommaso, D-I space capital T-O-M-M-A-S-O.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I so swear.
Thank you.